Welcome to Crime Documentary Files. Today we will delve into the heartbreaking murder case that took place in Fuzhou, Fujian Province, China. The protagonist of this story is Xieyu, an exceptionally talented academic prodigy. Xieyu's academic brilliance may have been inherited from his family. His grandfather was a highly educated man. Amid the turbulent period of 1949, not only did he complete his studies, but he also passed the entrance exam to Taiwan Normal University, a remarkable achievement at the time. However, upon returning to mainland China after the establishment of the People's Republic of China, his life took a tragic turn. During the Cultural Revolution, his intellectual background became a pretext for accusations of espionage. The brutal political persecutions of the time exacted a heavy toll. His eyes were tortured to the point of blindness, and he was imprisoned. After his release, he was forced to relocate to a rural area in Fuzhou, living a life of poverty as a farmer. He eventually married a blind woman from the village. Under these challenging circumstances, Xieyu's mother, Xie was born and raised. His grandfather went on to have 3 more children, a younger daughter and 2 younger sons. At that time, life for a family with 2 blind parents and 4 young children in rural China was unimaginably hard. Tianqin, as the eldest child, took on significant responsibilities from a young age, caring for her siblings, doing household chores, and even working in the fields daily. Despite their extreme poverty, Xieyu's grandparents never gave up on educating their children. They firmly believed that knowledge changes fate, and education was the only way to lift their children out of poverty. Tianqin did not disappoint her family. She became the only child in her village to pass the entrance exam for a secondary school in town. The entire Xi family made significant sacrifices to support her education. Her younger siblings, who struggled academically, dropped out of school early to work and alleviate the family's financial burden. In fact, her youngest brother was even sent to live with another family. Carrying the expectations of her entire family, Tianqin was admitted to Suzhou Normal University in 1986. Not only did she receive a full tuition waiver, but she also received a monthly stipend of 21 yuan. During that era, female college students were rare, and a young woman from a poor rural background with such a challenging family history was even more exceptional. However, due to childhood malnutrition, Tianqin was only 4 feet 11 inches tall. Her family background and past experiences shaped her personality, making her self-conscious about her humble origins. Nonetheless, she was disciplined, determined, and relentlessly hardworking. Tianqin eventually became a source of pride as a college student. These qualities profoundly influenced her life and left a lasting imprint on her son, Xieyu. After graduating from university, Tianqin was assigned as a history teacher at Nanjing High School in Fujian Province. Shortly after, she met Wu Zhijian, an engineer who graduated from Fuzhou University. He was tall, well-mannered, and worked at a state-owned factory, a stable and promising job at the time. However, his family background was no better than hers, as he also came from a poor rural area. His father passed away when he was young, leaving his mother and 4 children to struggle through years of hardship. Notably, Wu Zhijian's family included a younger sister with a mental illness. Some of Tianqin's colleagues advised her against marrying someone from a poorer background, warning that her life would only become more difficult. However, she dismissed their concerns, reasoning, "My parents were both blind. How can I look down on a sister-in-law with a mental illness? As long as we work hard, life will improve." This belief was not just optimism, but a lesson drawn from her own life, a testament to how perseverance could change one's destiny. After 6 months of dating, Tianqin and Wu Zhijian registered their marriage, officially becoming residents of Fuzhou, Fujian Province. About 2 years later, their small family welcomed a new member, their son, Xieyu. As the only child of 2 intellectual parents, Xieyu was expected to achieve great things. He grew up not only obedient, understanding, and filial, but also exceptionally brilliant in academics. He consistently ranked first in every school exam, earning so many certificates of merit that they could cover entire walls. Wu Xieyu's outstanding achievements even attracted parents of mischievous children to the Wu family home, seeking advice on how to educate their own kids. During such visits, Tianqin would often share her philosophy. Parents must be strict when it comes to their children's education. Learning is like rowing upstream. If you don't move forward, you'll fall behind. Sometimes parents must act as the rowers, pulling their children forward. She adhered to this principle with Xieyu. However, unlike parents who might resort to yelling, scolding, or even corporal punishment, Tianqin had a unique way of applying psychological pressure. Her most frequent remark to her son was, "I endured so much hardship just to get an education. If you don't study properly despite having everything you need, it would be a disgrace." Things that other children might take for granted, such as watching cartoons, playing video games, or snacking, were seen as disasters in her eyes. Even during the Chinese New Year, when other kids in the neighborhood would be outside playing with firecrackers, Xieyu was required to stay indoors and study. Interestingly, after his arrest years later, Xieyu admitted that he was not naturally gifted. Learning did not come easily to him. It was dry and tedious. All of his exceptional achievements and his consistent first-place rankings were the result of relentless effort, following his mother's mantra, "Diligence makes up for a lack of talent." Tianqin's control over her son extended beyond academics to other aspects of his life. A person claiming to be Xieyu's middle school classmate shared on social media that during his first visit to Xieyu's home to do homework, he underwent a rigorous interrogation by Tianqin. Her questions often revolved around academic performance. What were your scores on the monthly exam? What's your class rank? After a series of probing inquiries, she concluded that this boy was not good enough to befriend her son, leaving him embarrassed and prompting him to leave immediately. The budding friendship between the two boys ended before it could truly begin. With a controlling mother and study schedules consuming all his time, Wu Xieyu had no friends throughout elementary and middle school. He walked to school and back home alone, becoming a star student in the eyes of teachers but a bookworm in the eyes of his peers. Xie Tianqin's fixation on her son's education stemmed from the family's circumstances. In the 1990s, as China embraced economic reform, her peers began leaving their stable jobs to start businesses, quickly amassing wealth. However, Tianqin, driven by her steadfast belief that all professions are inferior, only academics are superior, clung to her ideals. She even prevented her husband from quitting his job to pursue entrepreneurship, insisting on maintaining the stable jobs they had always taken pride in. Times changed, and the stable jobs they valued became seen as stagnant and poor-paying. Meanwhile, Tianqin's siblings, despite not completing middle school, were buying homes and cars. Though they respected her family for being well-educated, Tianqin internally felt humiliated by the need to accept help from her siblings. One example of this tension occurred during a Lunar New Year gathering. Wu Xieiyu, then a middle schooler, borrowed his uncle's phone to send New Year greetings to his teacher. Upon noticing this, Tianqin harshly scolded her son in front of the entire family, calling it shameful. Xieyu was deeply upset, and his uncle's family was left embarrassed. The incident turned what was meant to be a joyful reunion dinner into an uncomfortable affair. Tianqin's rigidity extended beyond her immediate family to her in-laws. On one occasion, Wu Zhijian secretly sent 20,000 yuan to help his family pay for medical treatment for his mentally ill sister. When Tianqin discovered this, she flew into a rage, leading to a major argument with her husband and ultimately severing ties with all of his relatives. In stark contrast to his strong-willed wife, Wu Zhijian was a gentleman. Over the years, he acted as a mediator, comforting both his wife and son, and became the critical bridge in their strained relationship. He often defied his wife's rules to take Xieyu out for fried chicken or to play basketball at the school court. These small moments became some of the brightest and most cherished memories in Xieyu's otherwise dark and oppressive childhood. Tragically, those brief rays of light weren't enough to dispel the shadows in his life. Everything changed when his father passed away. In 2010, Wu Zhijian, at just 50 years old, died of liver cancer, leaving a gaping void in Xieyu's heart. Xieyu once said, "My father was proud of me. When I placed second in the middle school entrance exam, he took me to meet my English teacher and proudly shared my achievement with her. He said it was the happiest moment of his life. But only 6 months later, his father passed away." Even though Xieyu had secured first place in his midterm exams shortly after, there was no one left to share his joy with, as his father was gone. However, the death of her husband did not appear to cause much grief for Xi Tianqin. She refused a 50,000 yen donation that the school had raised for her and her son and sent the entirety of her husband's funeral subsidy to her mother-in-law in their rural hometown. Beyond financial matters, Tianqin also rejected all forms of emotional support. She built an invisible wall around herself, isolating from the outside world. Known for her strict and rigid demeanor at school, she became even more withdrawn after her husband's death. Regardless of the heat, she always dressed in fully covered dark clothing, avoided speaking to male colleagues or male students in her class, and refrained from smiling. After work, she declined all activities and lived a lifestyle akin to a medieval nun. Her complete disconnection from the outside world left her friendless, and her relationships with family grew increasingly distant. This isolation explains why, when she went missing for 6 months later, no one found it unusual. For Wu Xieyu, the loss of his father also meant losing the mediator, who had eased the tension between him and his mother. From that point on, he faced the full weight of his mother's overwhelming expectations, both academically and in daily life. If achieving high grades was once about pleasing his mother, it now became an absolute necessity. To her, anything less than first place meant losing face. The pressure from his mother, combined with the stress of preparing for the college entrance exams, began to take a toll on Xieyu's mental and physical health. He frequently experienced stomach aches, insomnia, dizziness, and large red rashes on his skin. These symptoms reminded him of his father, and he began to worry that he might have inherited a genetic illness. Secretly using the school computer, he searched for information about liver cancer and hereditary diseases. The more he learned, the more terrified he became. His fear of death led to chronic insomnia, which severely impacted his academic performance. Tianqin noticed the decline, but was powerless to address it. Their relationship had deteriorated to the point where the only topic of conversation between them was academics, leaving them completely unable to communicate about anything else. In 2012, Wu Xieyu was admitted to the economics program at Beijing University. To outsiders, this was a moment of pride and glory for the family. But for Xieyu, it was bittersweet. Despite scoring 670 points on the college entrance exam and ranking 116th in the province, his score fell below Beijing University's admissions threshold. He only managed to get in due to additional points from previous competitions. While his score was considered high locally, for a student who had always been first in class and was hailed as a study genius by peers, he knew he had fallen short. The exam he had spent 12 years preparing for turned out to be the first failure of his life. Wu Xieyu's mother, Xi Tianqin, also felt disappointed. She expressed no pride in his achievement. When colleagues came to congratulate her, she only exchanged a few words before hurrying home and shutting the door, as if her son had done something disgraceful. While other students, even those who hadn't scored well or been admitted to Beijing University, celebrated with yearbook photos and graduation parties, the cold, somber atmosphere at the Ji household stood in stark contrast. Despite this, Xieyu felt a sense of relief, knowing he would soon leave his mother and move over 600 miles away to Beijing for college. He was eager for the distance, but Tianqin had no intention of letting that happen fully. According to his roommates at Beijing University, Xieyu called his mother every day, spending at least 40 minutes and sometimes over an hour on the phone. Even trivial matters, like what he ate or what he read, had to be reported. Under her remote supervision, Xieyu continued to live like a high school student, sleeping at 11 p.m. and waking up at 7 a.m. even on weekends. Such discipline was rare, even among the elite students at Beijing University. His academic performance remained outstanding. While the university didn't publicly rank students, his peers acknowledged that Xieyu was among the top 3 in his class, and the top 10 in his department. In 2014, during his sophomore year, Xieyu took an international certification exam and scored in the top 5% globally. This achievement earned him a scholarship from a training center and an invitation to share his study techniques online, making him a star admired by both parents and students. It seemed likely that before graduation, he would secure admission offers from prestigious universities like Harvard or Oxford. However, his life took a different turn. In his junior year, Beijing University offered students the opportunity to participate in exchange programs at foreign universities for one semester. Many of Xieyu's classmates eagerly applied and prepared for their journeys. Yet the top-performing student Xieyu remained silent. He explained that his mother's poor health made him uneasy about leaving her alone, earning him quiet admiration for his filial piety. The reality, however, was different. Even with scholarships provided by Beijing University, the cost of a semester abroad ranged from 200,000 to 300,000 yuan, approximately $41,000. With Tianqin's monthly salary of just over 4,000 yuan, such expenses were a significant burden. While Xieyu could have opted for less prestigious programs with lower costs, doing so would have jeopardized his chances of getting into top-tier universities later, an unacceptable prospect for someone as ambitious as him. Borrowing money from relatives wasn't an option either. As mentioned earlier, Tianqin placed great importance on maintaining her dignity. Consequently, Xieyu had no choice but to stay in Beijing and continue his studies. At this point, the belief his mother had instilled in him, all professions are inferior, only academics are superior, began to waver. He started questioning, what's the point of excelling academically if you don't have money? He even thought that if his mother hadn't been so prideful, hadn't rejected the donation, and hadn't sent all of his father's funeral subsidies to his grandmother, he might already be sitting in a classroom at Harvard. For the first time in his life, Xieyu faced a problem that grades and achievements couldn't solve. It brought a profound sense of failure and shook the worldview of the young man to its core. Despite this, Xieyu never expressed his dissatisfaction to his mother. They continued their daily phone calls as if nothing had changed. However, by the following semester, when his classmates returned from the United States, they noticed that Xieyu had changed. He was no longer diligent, but instead lethargic, often staying in bed with the curtains tightly drawn and skipping classes more frequently. At this rate, not only was studying abroad out of reach, but even graduating from Beijing University became uncertain. Professors and faculty members tried to counsel and encourage him, but to no avail. He became increasingly apathetic, seemingly spiraling towards self-destruction. In his mind, he thought, if I can't be the best, I might as well be the worst. At the end of the semester, Xieyu suddenly submitted a request to move out of the dormitory, explaining, my father is moving to Beijing for work, and his company has rented an apartment. I want to live with him. This was an obvious lie, as his father had passed away over 5 years earlier. Perhaps deep down, Xieyu still longed to live with his father, leading him to concoct such an easily debunked story. However, the supervising teacher didn't suspect anything and quickly approved his request. At the end of June 2015, Xieyu borrowed 1,000 yen from a roommate and boarded a train back to Fuzhou. When his mother saw him unexpectedly return, she was overjoyed and immediately began preparing delicious meals to nourish him. But Tianqin had no idea that her son's return carried a dark and unspoken purpose. According to his later confession, Xieyu returned to Fuzhou with the intent to die with his mother. He felt his life had completely fallen apart. His studies were neglected, he saw himself as useless, and the hereditary cancer from his father loomed over him like a death sentence, threatening to strike at any moment. Beyond despair, he felt nothing else. However, before dying, he wanted to take his mother with him. This decision stemmed from a previous conversation between the two, during which his mother had said, "You are my only hope in this world. If you're gone, I don't want to live either." Later, however, Xieyu claimed that his mother had always been sorrowful and had thoughts of ending her life. He said he only wanted to free her from this world, and that she had willingly chosen death. On July 7th, 2015, Xieyu brutally murdered his mother while she was hanging laundry in their courtyard. But was Tianqin's death truly voluntary, as her son claimed? The forensic report revealed multiple severe injuries to the back of Tianqin's head, all concentrated at the base of her skull. The murder weapon was identified as a dumbbell, which was found at the scene. If her death had been voluntary, as her son suggested, why were the injuries inflicted from behind? Moreover, after killing his mother, Xieyu abandoned his initial plan. Instead, he took over 10,000 yen from her belongings and went to the largest hotel in Fuzhou, where he rented a room and hired a prostitute. For Tianqin, who had always considered sexuality a disgraceful topic, Xieyu's previous reluctance even to hold hands with a girl had been a source of pride. Yet this time, he resolved to do what he had never dared before, to cross that line before his death and leave no regrets. After his first sexual encounter, Xieyu felt as though he had entered a new world, realizing that life had many enjoyable aspects he had never experienced before. Suddenly, he no longer wanted to die. Over the next 2 days, he frequented bars, nightclubs, and other entertainment venues, spending all the money he had taken with him. Once the money ran out, Xieyu was reminded of his mother's body, still lying in their small apartment. By then, it was July, and Fuzhou's sweltering heat had caused her corpse to decompose, emitting a foul odor. Xieyu initially contemplated dismembering the body and disposing of it elsewhere. However, after making a few incisions, the stench and blood nauseated him, forcing him to abandon the idea. Unable to move his mother's entire body, he decided to handle it in place. Using his intelligence, Xieyu recalled the ancient Egyptian method of mummification. He purchased a large quantity of plastic wrap and activated charcoal online. He wrapped his mother's body layer by layer, placing activated charcoal between the layers to absorb moisture and eliminate odors. In total, he applied 75 layers, effectively turning her remains into a modern-day mummy. He then hid the body under his bed and bought a mannequin, wrapping it in plastic and activated charcoal in the same manner. Placing the mannequin on the bed and covering it with a blanket, he created a bizarre and chilling scene of one real, one fake. With the body concealed, Xieyu's next step was to fabricate a plausible explanation for his mother's disappearance. Forging her handwriting, he sent a resignation letter to her school, claiming that her son had been admitted to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, in the United States, and that she had obtained a visa to accompany him. He stated they would soon be leaving for the U.S. The forged resignation was quickly approved, and the school even provided Tianqin with an additional 6 months' salary. However, this money was insufficient for Xieyu's spending needs. He visited the school and inquired about the donation fund that had been offered to him and his mother years earlier, but was denied. This time, he claimed he urgently needed money for his upcoming studies abroad. As a former pride of the school for gaining admission to Beijing University and now preparing to study in the U.S., the principal didn't suspect anything and instructed the accountant to transfer money to Xieyu. Xieyu then returned to his hometown, borrowing money from relatives under the same pretense. He even took his grandmother's and great-grandmother's retirement savings. Impressed by Xieyu's academic achievements, his uncle generously gave him 560,000 yuan. In total, Xieyu scammed nearly 1.5 million yuan from all the family and friends who knew his family. Before fleeing, Xieyu did 2 final things. First, he installed a camera in the room where his mother's body was hidden, connecting it to his computer for remote monitoring. Second, he repaid the 1,000 yen he had borrowed from his roommate. Over the next 6 months, he checked the camera feed on his phone daily. He oscillated between hoping his mother's remains would never be discovered and feeling guilty that she couldn't rest in peace like others. On February 5th, 2016, unable to endure the internal torment, Xieyu sent a text message to his uncle saying, "Mom and I will return home for the new year." He asked his uncle to meet them at the Putian train station. However, after waiting for hours with no sign of them and receiving no response to his calls, the uncle became uneasy and went to their apartment in Fuzhou. When no one answered the door, he called the police. Upon forcing entry, the authorities discovered a horrifying scene. It had been 6 months since Tianqin was murdered, and her body had decomposed so severely that identification was only possible through DNA testing with her siblings. After a thorough investigation, Fuzhou police identified Wu Xieyu as the prime suspect. A nationwide warrant was issued for Xieyu's arrest. Only then did his uncle realize that Xieyu had never gone abroad, and that the 560,000 yen he had given his nephew had been a complete scam. For the next 3 years, Xieyu remained on the run, sparking countless rumors. Some speculated he had fled to Southeast Asia, while others claimed he had left a suicide note and jumped into the sea. In reality, during his time evading capture, Xieyu traveled across numerous provinces and cities in China, including major metropolitan areas like Shanghai and Shenzhen. Before his mother's body was discovered, he even returned to Beijing University, inquiring with former classmates about how to make up for missed exams. However, he never obtained the university degree he once desperately desired. After being placed on the wanted list, Xieyu completely abandoned himself to indulgence. He spent his days in entertainment venues and developed a new obsession: buying lottery tickets. Over time, he squandered more than 500,000 yen on gambling, only to end up empty-handed. The fact that an economics student from Beijing University believed he could change his life through lottery tickets is astounding. Even if he had won a significant prize, he would not have been able to claim it, as doing so would have exposed him to law enforcement. During this period, Xieyu also had multiple romantic relationships. At one point, he even proposed to a woman, offering her 200,000 yen as a bridal gift. Yet, none of his relationships worked out as he hoped. The dramatic and drastic changes in Xieyu's behavior may partly be attributed to the psychological shock of murdering his mother. However, the larger reason was likely the release from his mother's control, which unleashed his previously repressed desires. He became consumed by materialism and physical indulgence, descending into self-destruction like a derailed train hurtling into an abyss. After depleting the money he had swindled, Wu Xieyu needed a way to survive. Although he had purchased over 10 fake identification cards to evade detection, finding legitimate employment was impossible, as companies required background checks and social security registration, which would have exposed his true identity. Ultimately, he sought work in places with low identification requirements, where wages were paid daily and staff turnover was high, such as bars and nightclubs. Wu Xieyu gradually transitioned from being a customer to becoming a male host. According to his colleagues, he developed his own group of regular clients. He could sing in English, discuss philosophy, had read numerous classic works from both Eastern and Western literature, and could even talk about the stock market and economics. This intellectual edge made him stand out in an environment where most of his male colleagues had only completed middle school. In the dimly lit bars, the presence of an intellectual like Xieyu created a unique charm, particularly for wealthy older women. However, they had no idea that this young man was a fugitive, wanted nationwide for murder. During the day, aside from working at entertainment venues, Xieyu spent time at hair salons, gyms, eating snacks with colleagues, and even visiting clubs to socialize with female hosts. To avoid detection, he never stayed at one job for more than 3 months. Eventually, he fled to Chongqing, a city with complex terrain that served as an ideal hiding place for the fugitive. This time, Xieyu stayed in Chongqing for nearly a year, even applying for a job as a tutor at a private learning center, perhaps an attempt to start over. However, his luck finally ran out. On April 21, 2019, at the security checkpoint of Jiangbei Airport in Chongqing, a newly upgraded facial recognition system captured an image of Xieyu. The system matched him to his wanted poster with over 98% accuracy. Before he could leave the airport, police were waiting to arrest him. After his capture, Xieyu confessed to murdering his mother without hesitation. In May 2019, he was officially indicted. During his trial a year later, when speaking about his father, he broke down in tears, especially when recounting memories of the time before and after his father's death. However, when discussing his mother, his demeanor was detached. He briefly remarked, "My mother was a good wife, a good mother, and a good woman, with a noticeable lack of warmth." He added, "I know there is no better mother, no better wife, and no better woman in this world than my mother." When asked how he had known his mother's bank card PIN, he replied, "My mother never told me and I never saw her enter it. But I was certain it was my birth date. I didn't need to guess, I just knew she would use it." The court found Wu Xieyu guilty of premeditated murder, fraud involving a significant sum of money, and the illegal purchase and use of identification documents. He was sentenced to death. Upon hearing the verdict, he showed no visible emotion. On January 31st, 2024, the Intermediate People's Court of Fuzhou City announced that the death sentence for Wu Xieyu, age 29, had been carried out, officially closing the 9-year-long case of matricide. A little over a month earlier, while awaiting final approval of his death sentence, Wu Xieyu made one last effort. He asked his lawyer to deliver a handwritten letter to his uncle and grandmother, expressing his desire for forgiveness. He believed that only their forgiveness could offer him a sliver of hope for survival. In a bid to save his life, Xieyu even proposed transferring ownership of 2 properties he held in Fuzhou, hoping to trade money for his life. Wu Xieyu's uncle remained unmoved. He declared to the media, "I have blocked all contact with Xieyu and his lawyer, and am firmly against accepting any deals." As for his grandmother, who had lost her eyesight, she still believed that her daughter and grandson were living happily in the United States. No one had told her the tragic truth. Thus, forgiving Xieyu was not an option. Meanwhile, Xieyu's paternal family exhausted their resources in an attempt to save him. However, the appellate court upheld the death sentence. On January 31st, 2024, the sentence was carried out. The story of Wu Xieyu is not just a family tragedy, but also a painful lesson about betrayal, greed, and the irrevocable consequences of wrongful actions. Despite his efforts to make amends, from apologies to deceitful attempts to evade punishment, nothing could erase the heinous crime he committed. This case highlights the devastating effects of a lack of care, excessive control, or even neglect in parenting. These lessons serve as a wake-up call, not only for parents but also for society, emphasizing the importance of nurturing and educating the next generation with compassion and understanding. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you in our next video.